Western ideas of what magic is. With regards to secret societies and magical orders, it's hard to say what feeds what. Certainly the ideas of ritual that have come through groups such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn are very Masonic in their application and delivery. Even groups such as Wicca have very Freemasonic style initiation rites and rituals. Some of the words that are used are also part of Freemasonic rituals. And the reason for this is because the people who started those magical orders in the 19th century were Freemasons. Aleister Crowley, who's one of the most famous of occultists and magicians, was a Freemason. There are photographs of him in his Freemasonic regalia freely available on the internet. He was a member of the Golden Dawn, and other members of that group were also Freemasons. So they were drawing on off a common theme from a common source and elaborating something and perhaps creating a spiritual tradition from their own leanings and from their own rituals that they had experienced. Quite whether those rituals have come to us from antiquity or not is, again, it's very tenuous link. There's no real complete evidence. Because some of the so-called secret societies are so secretive by their very nature, we don't actually hear what they do. The only reason I know, I've put two and two together by reading a lot of information from a lot of different sources and correlating the bits that are the same and saying, well, hold on a minute, this is the same as this, is the same as this. What is the same in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, in Rosicrucianism, is the same in Freemasonry, is the same in Wicca, and so on. All of those people were related through Freemasonry.
There can be little doubt that Crowley caused something of an upswing in the recognition of possibilities inherent in magical knowledge. One of his contemporaries was one of the main proponents of chaos magic, Austin Osman Spare. Chaos magic is based on the premise that if the magician can drive himself into a sufficiently ecstatic state of concentration, he can empty his mind of all desire other than the one single endeavor in which he is focused. Then he may be able to release it into the cosmos. This itself comes from one of the main explanations of how chaos theory works. If a butterfly beats its wings on one side of the world, a hurricane breaks out on the other. In other words, an extremely small action can lead to one of infinitely greater magnitude. And so it is with chaos magic. It is usual for chaos magicians to harness a sigil to achieve their aims, and sigils in effect are a physical representation of the chaos state. A sigil can comprise of a long and unwieldy spell or incantation that has in effect been greatly reduced in volume while still retaining the power of the whole. It is not unknown for entire grimoires to be reduced to one single symbol or word of immense power. This can be seen in the terrifying power of the Shemham Forash, allegedly used by Moses to part the Red Sea, and the Tetragrammaton, or secret name of God. Other magicians who use the chaos technique include Kenneth Grant and the avant-garde filmmaker Kenneth Anger. This then is the common ground between all forms of magic. It has also been claimed that the Led Zeppelin rock god Jimmy Page had received instruction in the use of magic and was an associate of Kenneth Anger. He also owned Crowley's former home, Boleskine House. Another man claiming to use magic was the self-styled Satanist and founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey. LaVey also deliberately courted controversy and founded his religion based, so he said, of a total rejection of the old ways and freedom for the individual. Although LaVey attained his unsavory reputation for satanic practices and also wrote the Satanic Bible, he never reached the highs or lows attained by Crowley, the great master.
I think there were always elements of pagan belief systems that could be considered occultist or occult, occluded from normal view. There is some groups who suggest that they have a lineage that goes back way into antiquity. Quite whether they've made that up themselves or not to give themselves some credence is another matter entirely. But certainly there are, I think the only time it probably did become secretive, or more secretive, is when we have the Inquisition arriving. And certainly we have the so-called burning times, although people weren't really burned in this country, they were often hung instead, whereby, you know, that people were pointing fingers at their neighbours and their, you know, other members of their families, and suggesting that they were, you know, turning the milk sour from the cows, or, you know, casting the evil eye, or causing some problem for somebody. When you had a situation, certainly during the Middle Ages, where you had the church, who were the people who had hold of all the knowledge that there was of the world and as it existed at that time, and the lay person, the people, the everyday person, who perhaps didn't read and write, who was ignorant to a lot of what happened around them, so perhaps would have seen more mystery and more intrigue than perhaps was there. And maybe there were scores to settle in villages, instead of there being a dispute that was taken out in the open, that was discussed rationally. It would have been easier to point the finger at someone and say, they're a witch. They've caused my daughter's hair to fall out. Now, that daughter could have had an illness. It could have had alopecia that made the hair fall out. But because those people were ignorant of those things, they were ignorant of the science and everything that was going beyond that, they wouldn't have known what was happening. So it's easy to point the finger at someone, because they were either a woman who was very beautiful, a woman who lived on their own, and it wasn't just women in particular who were persecuted during those times. And men were persecuted just as much, and children were persecuted. Even animals were persecuted. Animals were killed because it was thought that they contained an evil spirit, or that they had caused something to happen. We're looking at a time where people were very, very suspicious because they had very little knowledge of life and of everything.
Perhaps the old sorcerer had indeed stumbled on the truth behind the miracle, the very backbone of the technology, for that, rightly or wrongly, is what magic is. Crowley had applied the power of the human will, the philosophy at the core of Thelema, and indeed the mainspring powering chaos magic, and by extension, all magic. It is amazing when one considers that the sole reason this ubiquitous, ephemeral, yet unbelievably powerful technology was discarded was not because it did not work, for it did, but simply because people no longer believed that it could or would work. It was, of course, a negative strategy eagerly deployed by religions of all hues to enforce and enhance their own positions. Now it would seem we have come full circle. We now have an inkling of how our ancestors were able to control and interact with the forces of the cosmos. We have our own version of the shamans of old. We have the masters of the atom, the mages of the microworld, and the new magic, quantum physics. For it is the quantum scientist whose arcane and esoteric formula have replaced the grimoires of old and substituted the foul concoction used in spells and potions with the clean and clinical numbers at the heart of their equations. It is they who have now become the sorcerers. It is here that we find the torturous, mathematical oddities describing the Mobius strip and the inverted, subtle, but unescapable logic of the Klein universe. In this world, we at last find the equivalence that has escaped us for millennia. What was once the logic of observation and instinct now finds validation in the threads that form the weft and weave of the universe, the infinitely subtle fibers of numbers. Numbers that define what we are, what we see, where we come from, and where we will go. They are the door to the other world, the corridor to the multiverse, and the key that sits patiently waiting in the lock. All we need now is to turn that key and see the pathways to infinity that lie beyond. For here, there is no occult. There is no darkness. There is no fear. Here, there is only hope.
I think that there is certainly a move amongst spiritual groups towards a more natural way of living, and certainly with regard to being concerned about the impact that we're having on our planet. There is a move certainly towards with recycling and reclaiming things, making do with what we have as opposed to constantly going out and buying new things. We are in a position to look at the spiritual aspects of our lives much more deep, and certainly science has come a long way in explaining a lot of what was once considered, magical. Science is now explaining stuff that, 100 years ago could not have been explained. And each year it would seem that more and more is being explained. Yet there are still mysteries out there that we will never, ever be able to understand. It would seem that with relating everything to everything, science is being able to explain that virtually everything on this planet has elements of everything in it. Whether it's, everything on this planet is made up of the same molecules, if you like. It goes beyond molecules, it goes right down into quantum level, where we are going even further now. We're finding things that we can't explain. We're finding these elements of energy that can't be explained, or that can't rationally be explained, but have been explained spiritually for thousands of years. This whole idea, then, that science is finally catching up with what the animists were saying, that everything has spiritual energy.
What's the occult then? Well, a lot of people believe that science can't answer all the questions. It can answer a lot of questions. There are things that people are believing that are so obvious that science denies them. What about topics like intuition, addiction, angels, spirits, ghosts, God and the devil? There are so many things that science denies, but people know they exist. So where does the occult come from then? Is it evil? Is it good? Does it fit squarely between the two? How many of us these days take advantage of alternative therapies such as Reiki, healing crystals? How many of us believe we've got a guardian angel? How many of us go to a medium for a reading? Just because these things can't be explained by science doesn't mean to say they don't exist. I used to believe that beyond this world there was a struggle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And I no longer believe that. All I believe is that there are light workers. There are people or spirits working there for the good of everybody. But there are always people who are fighting against them and working against them. I suppose the occult is where someone tries to contact one of these forces of good or forces of evil to try and intercede on their behalf. Could this be for good or for evil? You only have to mention the word occult and you go all creepy and spooky. So suppose the occult is associated with the dark side of all this. You just hear the word occult and think of Satan. And I suppose that's what I think of when you mention it too.